This is Christian Breton of Quebec City, Quebec. You're listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Welcome, everybody, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, September the 29th. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill. This is our weekly visit with you, 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio. Lots going on in the world of radio this past week. We hope that any of our listeners that are in the areas affected by the hurricane and tropical storm are okay. We're still, as we're recording, we're waiting to hear more information of just how bad things were in certain areas. We'll have a little bit of radio-related talk on the storm coming up in the second part of the show. So we thank you for tuning in. We'll get going right away with a story from the United States, which is getting quite a bit of attention. This was written by Wilson Freeman in the Washington Examiner. The Federal Communications Commission public DEI shaming is unconstitutional. DEI, of course, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some unconstitutional regulations are like zombies. A court can put them down only to see them shamble back to life. In a recent order, the FCC has resurrected a policy that many assumed was dead. From the 1980s until 1998, the FCC required television and radio broadcasters to classify all station employees, both full and part-time, by race or ethnicity and gender. These regulations pressured broadcasters to maintain a diverse workforce by threatening their licenses if they failed to reflect the right demographics. But in 1998, following Supreme Court decisions striking down other race-conscious government policies, the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals struck down the FCC's program as unconstitutional. Following that decision, the FCC let the policy lie. For almost 30 years, broadcasters haven't been required to survey and report on the race and ethnicity of their employees. But now, like the undead, this policy has risen again, in a form even worse than before. In its new incarnation, the FCC will not only require broadcasters to report this information, but also post it online for the world to see, effectively producing a racial scorecard for every broadcaster in the country. The FCC's new rule is just as, if not more, unconstitutional than the policy the court previously struck down. Of course, to comply with the D.C. Circuit's decision, the FCC promises, cross its heart, that the racial scorecard it collects will not be used against broadcasters in the licensing process. But this promise is empty. If the data truly has no bearing on the regulatory process, why collect data at all? And what statutory authority does the agency have to collect data for mere information purposes? Plus, the mere act of collecting and publishing this information creates an implicit pressure on broadcasters, lest they face public scrutiny or unofficial repercussions. This informal coercion is, in many ways, worse than the formal pressure struck down in 1998. At least a quota could be satisfied. Reputational damage can never be fixed. And there is little doubt that this is the FCC's not-so-secret intention. Even if the FCC fixed the equal protection problems, its new policy to publish these reports online violates broadcasters' free speech and employee privacy. Under the policy, broadcasters must classify each of their employees into one of 6 racial buckets, as the FCC's form states. Minority group information necessary for this section may be obtained either by visual surveys of the workforce or from post-employment records as to the identity of employees. An employee may be included in the minority group to which she or he appears to belong. Accordingly, it doesn't matter how an employee self-identifies or whether he wishes to be classified at all. The broadcaster must make a determination based on appearance, if necessary, forcing employers to engage in racial profiling and potentially misclassify employees against their will. The practice not only infringes on individual privacy rights, but also compels broadcasters to express a government-mandated message about their employees' racial identities, regardless of the accuracy or appropriateness of such classifications. This seems especially absurd in today's era, where our understanding of race and ethnicity is increasingly nuanced and fluid. Many individuals may not fit neatly into the FCC's predetermined categories, or may identify differently than their outward appearance suggests. Employers may not feel comfortable trying to look at their employees' skin color in order to attempt to place them into one of 6 artificial buckets. These artificial categories the FCC is seeking to entrench are the same categories the Supreme Court recently called incoherent and the cause of irrational stereotypes. Humanity cannot be usefully divided into 6 groups based on skin color. Entrenching these divisions into public consciousness only further divides us. And by publicly posting these reports for all to see, the FCC is enlisting employers in the social balkanization efforts while allowing the entire world to scrutinize them on their compliance with the right racial ratios. The FCC's rule is rife with legal flaws. Thus, it is no surprise that the policy has come under vigorous attack. My law firm, the Pacific Legal Foundation, represents the Dove Media, a nonprofit corporation dedicated to Christian broadcasting, a licensee of a handful of small radio stations and low-powered TV stations in Oregon. The Dove sees the many problems with the FCC's order and, with PLF's help, has filed suit to have it overturned. The lawsuit has joined several other lawsuits filed by various parties. All of these cases are currently pending before the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The FCC's zombie order must meet the same fate it met the first time. Hopefully, the federal courts will oblige. And we note that the author, Wilson Freeman, is an attorney at Pacific Legal Foundation, a public interest law firm that defends Americans' liberties against government overreach and abuse. Well, I think this definitely classifies as overreach and abuse and invasion of privacy and maybe a whole list of other things that shouldn't be happening.
Oh, definitely. I mean, for 30 years, they're not asking anything, and suddenly one day, they get up and they say, hey, we want to know all of these details, which, why? First of all, it's none of your business. And indeed, it is something that, when you start doing that, you start generating differences between people, which should not exist.
I think these are the flaws that we see with this whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing that's going on. It sounded good at the beginning, but the more they try to implement it, the more problems it seems to cause.
I think what happens is the basic ideas start good, but when you implement them and enforce them, that's where you start creating differences between everybody.
Yeah, it's almost like they want to color code everybody or put a tag on them or some kind of stamp on them to say you're one of these 6 categories. And what qualifications do the station personnel people have to identify people in the first place? Especially, you have such an ethnic mix of people in the United States as we do here in Canada. It's almost an impossible thing for people to do. And if they do try to do it just to meet the regulation, they're going to screw it up. You just know they are.
Definitely.
So we'll have to keep an eye out on this one, see how the legal challenges go. Hopefully they come to the same conclusion that they did 20 years ago.
In our next story, we have the Thistle Shamrock ends after 41 years of broadcasting on NPR. This is by WUNC News via Radioworld. NPR's The Thistle Shamrock will broadcast its final show this Sunday evening after 41 years of broadcasting. During that time, the show brought traditional Celtic music into homes across the country on 237 NPR member stations. Host Fiona Ritchie developed the program at WFAE in Charlotte in the early 80s. In 1990, NPR began distributing the program nationally. I was really young when a radio station opened their doors to me, and I first connected with NPR listeners, Ritchie told NPR, when she announced her retirement. How many young women are waiting for an opportunity to share their worlds and find their audiences in today's vast and complex media landscape? We need to create chances for the next generation of music hosts and allow diverse young voices to claim a space on these precious airwaves, just as I did. Let's find them, encourage them, and hear them. WUNC's final broadcast of the Thistle and Shamrock will air on Sunday at 10 p.m. So if you want to hear the last show after all of those years, it's happening at 10 p.m.
Yeah, I sent this story to our friend Eric Cottrell down in Massachusetts. He was a regular listener to this show. He did answer me. He was disappointed in hearing this, but he said he thought he detected a couple little hints about it coming to an end in listening to the show recently. So unfortunately, 41 years on the air is a long way to keep a radio show going. We know all about that.
Yeah.
We've been here since 1987 and happy to keep the show going. But, I guess this is her retirement and they just decided, okay, we're not going to replace you. We're going to just drop the show completely. So kind of sad.
Yeah, and I like the fact that she's saying, we should help out to the new people out there that would have to make content, would like to have content on the radio and help them, broadcast to an audience. So our next story, former WCBS 880 staffers hold tribute special on YouTube. This is via Barrett Media. So after the demise of WCBS 880 earlier this year, many current and former employees of the New York All News brand shared memories of the station in various ways. On Monday, many of those same staffers commemorated the station on YouTube. On the Jim Masters TV YouTube channel, and we'll share the link to this, several former staffers joined together to share their memories of the venerable news brand. Joining the tribute show were former WCBS 880 employees like Wayne Cabot, Anita Bonita, Peter Haskell, Rich Lamb, Todd Glickman, Levin Putney, Bill Schweizer, and Jim Feldman. Many memories were shared by the assembled cast of former employees as they discussed the history and importance of the station in not just New York, but the surrounding areas of New Jersey and Connecticut as well. Most were in agreement that the 9/11 terrorist attacks were the largest and most consequential story covered by WCBS during its nearly 60-year run in the all-news format. For nearly 3 hours, the former WCBS 880 employees discussed some of the more pressing topics in news media today, in addition to sharing their memories of both on-air and behind-the-scenes happenings in the New York station. While speaking with Wayne Cabot, Jim Masters shared his admiration and appreciation for the final send-off the station received by the longtime morning news anchor. Cabot joked that if he knew the end of the station would have been played on outlets like CNN and SiriusXM by Howard Stern, he would have put much more thought into what he recorded, leading to a worse product than what he actually delivered. So I did watch about 15 minutes of it, and it definitely is very interesting. I'm going to watch all of it, that's for sure. So go and check out that YouTube video.
Yeah, and it certainly had more of a reach than just what they talked about, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Yeah. I mean, it was a regular here in Montreal, and so many people commented on the demise of the radio station's format. So if you are interested in it, do check out the link that we'll put up for that special almost 3-hour YouTube show reminiscing about WCBS 880.
So what's happening with our son? Well, our son is into a quieter week, although there was some geomagnetic disturbances still, because we're in the equinox, and it doesn't take much for any solar flare or any coronal mass ejection to actually create unsettled conditions. There are some sunspots, they are 3833, 3835, and 3836, that all have what it takes to create big flares. So that will be something to watch. Once again, if conditions degrade rapidly, you might be into a solar flare, and there could be some more coronal mass ejections. The sunspot number 189, the solar flex is 181, and conditions are rather quiet right now, and they are actually really good when they are. But like I said, things can change rapidly. One little note about the space around us. There's a comet that is soon to be visible in the northern hemisphere, and that comet might brighten enough that it will be visible in daylight around October 10th, 12th. So that will be something to check out. Go see spaceweather.com. They have all the details of that comet, which I will not try to pronounce the name. And well, if you want to see how conditions are on the radio, well, that's exactly what you need, a radio, and you got to turn it on.
Hi, I'm Eric Cottrell of Lynn, Massachusetts. I get my weekly radio news on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in beautiful Montreal.
It's always neat to find stories about things that went on in radio history. And a really fascinating story popped up this week through some research that was being done by historians about various historical broadcasts. The headline is Voice of America radio broadcast first to announce Japan's 1945 surrender, historians have found. This is by Lee Soo-Jung of the Korea JoongAng Daily. Historians have found that a broadcast from the U.S.-based Voice of America was the first to inform the Korean public of Japan's surrender to the Allies at the end of World War II, according to the People's Power Party Republic representative Bae Hyun-jin on Wednesday. Koreans had previously assumed that Hirohito's radio speech at noon on August the 15th, 1945, was the first broadcast informing the public of Japan's surrender. But the VOA announcement was found to have aired 4 hours before Hirohito publicly delivered his official surrender statement, according to the public broadcaster KBS. This makes it the first broadcast to deliver the news of the Korean public's imminent liberation. The original VOA broadcast was sent over shortwave radio and delivered in Korean, English, and Chinese. In its English broadcast, VOA announced Hirohito's statement by saying the emperor would read an imperial rescript at noon Wednesday Japan time, less than 4 hours from now. In its Korean language broadcast, the VOA told people of Joseon that Japan had fully accepted the terms of the Potsdam Declaration and has surrendered unconditionally, referring to Korea by the name used by the last native royal dynasty. The Korean language broadcast was also included the first and second verses of what later became the South Korean national anthem. The 270-minute-long VOA broadcast was recorded on a reel-to-reel tape. It was previously stored at the U.S. Office of War Information and was recently transferred to the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration. Bae, who sits on the National Assembly's Culture, Sports, and Tourism Committee, says she analyzed the tape with historians and researchers from the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History, who authenticated the recording. She also said the broadcast gave new meaning to Japan's surrender by using the Korean language. Hirohito's declaration followed the terms of the unconditional surrender demanded by the Allies in the Potsdam Declaration, which was signed by U.S. President Harry Truman, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the Republic of China, only a few weeks prior. The VOA's 1945 broadcast in the Korean language was recorded by Hwang Seong-soo, who later served as deputy speaker in the Third National Assembly of Korea from 1954 to 1958. During World War II, Hwang wrote anti-Japanese propaganda messages while working at the U.S. Office of War of Information during his studies in the United States, according to KBS. According to local media, the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History plans to transfer the recording to Seoul in cooperation with its U.S. counterparts, with the aim of registering it as a national record. So that's pretty neat. Surprising it took this long for somebody to stumble onto it and realize that that first recording actually came from the Voice of America using that good old-fashioned shortwave radio transmission.
Imagine the amount of recordings that must exist somewhere out there that has all these historical moments. Amazing. Every time I hear the old broadcasts like that and, the audio quality of that time, that brings it even more into the fact that it's an old recording. I always love these. It's always fun.
Yep, using reel-to-reel tape too. So it puts an age tag onto it as well. So, anyways, hopefully they'll make that available publicly, and it would be great to be able to listen to that.
In our next story, we have China to mandate radios in cars for emergency alerts by Xiao Yisi, Yicai Global via Radioinfo Asia. Isn't that a story that rings a bell here in North America?
Just a little bit, yeah.
September 19th, China has issued a draft document requiring all vehicles to be equipped with wireless radio to ensure drivers receive real-time alerts on national disasters. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology began soliciting opinions yesterday on the draft mandatory national standard for in-vehicle wireless radio receiving systems. The deadline for feedback is October 25th. Traditional wireless radio receivers have been left out of some new car models amid the shift to new energy vehicles and smart cars that have advanced communication systems, such as the Internet of Vehicles, which prioritize digital and internet-based infotainment systems over radio. But radio remains one of the most reliable means of communication during emergencies, particularly natural disasters, where internet-based communication could fail due to infrastructure damage or power outage. Radio has a unique advantage in getting alerts to drivers on natural disasters, including earthquakes and landslides, and other safety information, the ministry said in the document. This is because FM radio broadcast towers can cover more than 100 kilometers, while medium wave radio stations can cover distances in excess of 1,000 kilometers, making it unlikely for drivers to find themselves in a blind spot. Same story, but at least they're not trying to pass a bill and trying to focus on it. They just do it. And so, shows that even Chinese government and China understands that radio is important because the internet could go down.
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of people just in the last 24 hours who were thinking, gee, maybe it might have been a good idea to have a little battery-powered radio around, when that hurricane stormed its way through Florida and Georgia and North Carolina, now even heading towards Tennessee. And a good thing to have, just a good old-fashioned radio. So we've mentioned the Hurricane Helene, as they were calling it. We were calling it Hélène here in Quebec, obviously, with the spelling. I didn't hear anybody call it Helen, so at least they saw the extra E on the end of it and realized it was not just Helen. But it was a monumental storm, historical level of storm, so large, affecting so many areas and with such strength. Certainly communications, radio in particular, played a great part in it. People without power, as we just mentioned with the previous story, a very good idea to have a fresh set of batteries and a portable radio around when something like this happens. You were monitoring some of the amateur radio activity that was going on?
Yep, I was monitoring the Hurricane Watch Net on 14325 upper sideband during the daytime, 7268 kilohertz lower sideband in the evening. There was a lot of traffic, and they were asking anybody that had, weather stations that give all the details, what was the temperature, the wind speeds, and the barometer, and so on. It was somewhat interesting listening. You leave that like in the background, and while you do other stuff, you just listen into the different stations checking in. There was that. I did go on the internet on YouTube to watch a bunch of storm chasers getting into the eye of the hurricane, which was, I have to admit, very impressive to see, but also very crazy for people to try to do that, for sure.
Very dangerous, yeah.
I also monitored quite a lot through the streaming on internet radio, different broadcasters, see how they deal with the news of the hurricane also, which was very interesting. And you were talking about Helene and Hélène. Well, there was one broadcaster that, while mentioning the name 3 or 4 times, was jumping from Ellen to Helene. It was that one was funny.
I was watching actually on the internet some live feeds of some TV stations in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. The one thing I found really interesting was one of the stations actually put up a screenshot saying if you lose power and you can't see our TV feed, you can listen to our audio on radio. And they actually put up a panel on the screen with the names of 5 radio stations with the frequencies for people to tune to. So someone there was thinking about that. And those they were all FM stations, and they were rebroadcasting the audio from the television station. So that was quite interesting to see the connection between, and they weren't stations all owned by one company either. I did look into that. So you don't see that happen very often, where they're promoting other radio stations and other stations within their company. So I was happy to see that, and hopefully some people did resort to radio to keep them informed of what was going on.
Yeah, that tells you do need a radio. It's very important. And don't think because you're in a big city that, things are not as bad. We've had several things happen here in Quebec, and Montreal is hard hit, and I was happy to have a radio.
Definitely. We'll wrap up today with a few ham radio contests coming up. And of course, you need a radio for these. Without one, you'll have difficulty.
Yeah.
First off, the Worked All Provinces of China DX contest, 0600 to October 5th to 0559 Zulu October the 6th, organized by the Mulan DX Club. They want, for this 24-hour period, for as many hams to contact the amateurs in Chinese provinces, municipal cities, autonomous regions, and special administration regions. It's 80 through 10 meters, and it is a CW event.
There's the Oceania DX contest, CW, 0600 Zulu October 5th to 0600 Zulu October 6th, organized by the Wireless Institute of Australia. Bands 160 through 10 meters, CW only.
And finally, the California QSO Party, organized by the Northern California Contest Club, 1600 Zulu October 5th to 2200 Zulu October the 6th. It is both CW and phone, and it is 160 through 10 meters.
And we are out of time.
We thank you for listening. Our email address, if you'd like to contact us, radioreport@yahoo.com. Of course, you can listen to our show live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, has a new member. His name is Dirk Lorenz of the Australian Network Media Channel, Brisbane, Australia. So we welcome him. Our YouTube channel is found at youtube.com/@IRR. You can listen to our programs there at your convenience. And you can also follow us on X. Our account is @IRRCKUT. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you again next week on the International Radio Report here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.